Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of KCrush American Magazine's featured interviews. I'm your host, film culture critic and film journalist Carolyn Hinds, and this is one of my special interviews for the 2025 Minikino Film Week 11 held in Bali, Indonesia. And today I'm very happy to be joined by filmmaker Wulan Putri to talk about her short film, her documentary Tutaha Subang, A Tale for My Daughter, which is a very interesting documentary in the way it's filmed and edited and shot, because it basically the camera stays on this series of photographs. There is no external shots, it's all just these photographs, but it's the voice of a mother, and the voiceover is done by Ricardo Ma, and it's this mother who is, I got the impression she's reading this letter to the child in her womb, her daughter, who she's named Beatrice Parmila Wali, but she's like, I will call you Mila. And she's talking to Mila, and she's writing this letter about how her country, South Papua, has changed throughout the years from when she was a child to how she was now as a pregnant mother. And she's talking about colonialism, colonization, industrialization, westernization, as well as the encroachment of Christianity into South Papua culture and traditions, and how that's kind of warped like how people see themselves and see the country and the culture, as well as gender. There's discussions on gender, and it's so fascinating to have this mother read this letter. And she covers so many topics in this letter, and so it gives a very interesting insight into not only Indonesian culture, but just to like how women of indigenous tribes, whether it's in Indonesia, whether it's in the Amazon, whether it's in the Caribbean, in Africa, in First Nations and people here in Canada or in North America, how women in indigenous communities are affected by all of these external forces. And all of this we'll get into in the interview. But first of all, Wulan, thank you so much for taking the time for talking to me. Thank you. Before we begin talking about Tutaha Sabang, talk to me a bit about how you became involved in filmmaking and what it's like being a filmmaker in Jakarta.
So my background is actually a historian. I am a historian. I study history. And so one time I have this platform called Perempuan Berkabar where me and my friends were documenting women's activities across Indonesia. So one time we made a documentary about another indigenous women. And then at our screening, we met friends from Greenpeace, Project Mutatuli, and Pusaka Bentara Rakyat. So we talk about so Greenpeace at that time have some sort of a campaign about this OU tribe in South Papua, because they face so they file a, what do we call that in English, cassation to the Supreme Court. So we talk about what can we do with it, and so we kind of agreed to make a documentary about this Au tribe, and then so yeah.
And how did you what was your career like as a historian? Like you clearly you focused on women, but like how did you even become a historian? What made you decide to pursue that career path in Indonesia?
It's not I don't know. So I think it's really interesting to see how everything that happened in the past affect our life today. So I don't know. So I think what I am today is half or 3 to 4% who I am today is actually already happened in the past. So I think it's really interesting to see, and it's not just happening to me. I think it's also happened to most people, like how I don't know, colonialism and uh, so I came from West Sumatra in uh in 1958. There's a this rebellion happening in West Sumatra against the our government, and I think it really affect my mother and most people around me. So I think it's really, I don't know, I feel the need to go back in time to see who I am, who are the people I'm living with today, and I think it really affects, yeah, everyone.
Mm. And this film, and like you just mentioned your mom, and that's interesting to me because this film is about a mother. It's a mother talking to her kid, her daughter, and she's talking about like how the culture of South Papua, and just like I guess you would say the whole Indonesian archipelago changed once the
Mm.
Europeans arrived. And like once they really started to move into the interior and
Mhm.
basically usurp the position of the South Papua people, and I was reading up on it. It was predicted. It was particularly the Dutch, that came in and they were like, "Oh, we're gonna claim this land and we're gonna expand and colonize it, and like we're gonna separate the people from their culture, and we're gonna draw these borders, and separate the cultures, and say like this is Papua New Guinea, this is West Papua, this is South Papua, and then they were like, "Oh, there's this and it's a river mentioned in the film." Oh, my dog was barking. And they were like looking at like how they can claim these resources, and is this
Mhm.
woman talking about all these things. So talk to me about just focusing on a mother, like how, first of all, this is a letter being written and read to her daughter. Is this an actual letter? I was wondering if it was an actual letter that you found and you were like, I want to make a film about this letter, or did you write the letter yourself?
So when we in back in the field, Ricardama, my protagonist, the one you saw in the still, she was 9 months pregnant at the time, and she was on a labor the day I left to Jakarta. Yeah, so I think it's with documentary, it's just everything is unpredictable. And then because she was 9 months pregnant at the time, I think I should find a way to somehow tell her story. Uh, I'm asking her to write a letter to her daughter, but the condition was very. She was hard to breathe, I guess. Like at the time, because she was 9 months pregnant, and every time we talk, she was like
Mm,
inhale, exhale. But so, but she tried to make the letter herself. But I think the letter in the end is actually, I might say, it's a collaboration actually between me and her. Like, okay, then I decide to write the letter for her from the interview, from the talks that we had before. So it's kind of going back and forth with, what do you think about this? What do you think about this line? What do you think about, sort of thing? So yeah, but all the things that we write in the letter is actually from her experience. I think that's what,
mm.
yeah.
How old was she at that time?
Ricarda?
Yeah.
Ricarda, I think she's the same with my age. So 30, no, she's maybe like 2 years younger than me, like 37 maybe now.
Okay. So what year was the film? What year were you working with her on the letter, and like doing these interviews with her? Well, how long ago was that?
Uh, so I came to the South Papua. She lived on this Digul. Digul is a small city in South Papua. Um, it's near Merauke. Uh, so I call this harvesting. Uh, like we're harvesting what was happened in the past with her,
Hmm.
and how did she feel about everything that's going on. I think it's really hard for her uh to deal with what's going on at the time, like, because so this tribe is one of the biggest tribe in South Papua and Indigo. But then this industry came, this what do you call that in English? Sorry, I used to
It's okay.
lost words.
He's okay.
So yeah. So I think I met her for like 2 weeks.
Mm.
But then yeah, we came up with the idea that it's really hard to for me it's really hard to see her like keep because she was 9 months pregnant.
Yeah, it's because like the baby presses on like the lungs and it makes it hard to breathe and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I think so. We decided to textualize all
Mm.
the talks and all the interview we had, all the story we share. So yes.
Yeah, like so this was like about so let me see the film was released around you told me like 2024 last year was when it began distributing it for festivals. So this was done around 2022, maybe 2023.
Yes, 2023.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that's about yeah. So that's just about 2.5 years ago because we're almost at the end of 2025. And the reason I'm asking this is because like and about her age is because but in the way how the letter is written and just the things that she says are so and I'm not infantilizing her, but it's just they're so self-aware and they're also so intelligently expressed, and like where she like how she begins the letter talking about let me get my notes. She begins to talk the letter. First of all, she's identifying Mila as a person, like she's not talking to Mila as though she's talking to a baby, she's talking to Mila as though she's already talking to an adult, to someone who's fully knows who they are and who has hopes and dreams. So that first of all is interesting to me. The letter is addressed to an adult. And then the letter begins by identifying Mila, giving her an identity, but then she starts talking about being a woman, and I like what's it like being a woman in this land, like in like one of the first quotes is like in this land, being born as a woman can mean a good omen or the opposite, and she's talking about how in South Papua, and I think anywhere in the world, like women are supposed to because we're mothers, we're nourishers, we're the caretakers, and these are good things. But then, like also because of patriarchy, it's seen as a bad thing, it's seen as a negative, as a hindrance. Like we're goddesses, but yes, so we're also curses. She starts the letter there. She's talking about how women there's these two sides of how society views women, and then she talks about, she applies it to the land, like she believes that the land is a mother, like, and I thought that was interesting because outside of that, like in most cultures, like we consider the earth as like Mother Earth, like the earth is a woman. When I'm talking about countries, I always refer to countries as women. I always say like I'm from Barbados, I say Barbados, and I identify Barbados as a woman. And like I say, I'm like Barbadians we are her children. So like having her kind of say the same thing, but almost as though this isn't actually a part of South Papua Indigenous culture is interesting to me. So talk about just that beginning of this film and the beginning of the letter with her identifying Mila and then talking about just what being a woman in this culture is like.
So what would I say about this conversation with Rika is actually that it's our share experience. Like so it's also happened with the letter, I guess. So that I told you before that we talked for days and weeks, and then I tried to write her experience in the letter.
Mm,
But I think at some point I also put my experience. It also reflect my experience as a woman as well, because as a mother as well, because I have a daughter. So maybe it's also a letter that I didn't send to my daughter
mm,
because you know that we live in this hetero patriarchy world
mm,
where um so now I live in Jakarta for like 5 years, but I actually came from West Sumatra
mhm,
uh sometimes I used to think that it's really hard for me as a woman, as a mother, to be uprooted from my own land, like because this pandemic happened and then I have to move because there's nothing to do in West Sumatra because I don't have any land to cultivate and sort of things. And then I decide to move. So when the pandemics hit, I have to move to Jakarta and sort of things. And because in Sumatra, in Sumatra context, the colon
Colonial.
yeah, the colonization is already happened since like 150 years ago. So we already have nothing to nothing to cultivate in. Yeah, it's so what I saw is this is what is happening in Papua right now. And yeah, I think uh it's a big part of shared experience between me and many people like me and Rika.
Mhm. Yeah,
It's
you said that it's like a letter you didn't write to your daughter, but maybe you could look at you when having discussions with your daughter. You're like saying, "This is exactly what I wish I had written to you when you were born," and now you have this because, like again, like the film is very much specifically about South Papua culture and history. But again, there's so many things like you said, it's shared experiences of women everywhere that we can relate to. And again, me being someone from from Barbados, which was a former British colony, we gained independence in 19 what am I blog about in 1966. I should know this better. In 1966 we gained independence from the British colony from the British, but even after that we still had like the British were considered our head of state only until a few years ago where we became a full republic. And like I can relate to that, like how do you as an indigenous woman, and even me being Barbadian and me being a descendant of enslaved people means that Barbados isn't indigenously my home. My ancestral home is in Africa, but it's still the same, like how does watching these interlopers, these colonizers come in and change your culture before your eyes? And I think that's something so unique to have now in the present in 2025, have stories of people talking about they're seeing colonization happen actively before their eyes. For the majority of us, it's as you said, 150, 100 years ago, even 75, even 50 years ago, but it's happening still. Colonization is still happening. It's happening in South Papua. So you have this mother writing this letter saying, I'm watching my people be colonized before my eyes. And me being a woman, I can see it happening, but the men are don't seem to care because the men are she call it being seduced by the colonizers. They're being seduced by these companies, these foreign companies coming in and saying, how about we tear down the indigenous trees, to bring in trees that aren't native to us so that we can cultivate it for them. And she's so observant, and like you said in letter, like you're so observant, and like the film is talking about all these things and saying, I as a woman, I can see it, but because I as a woman, I'm not valued with regards to my voice, no one is listening to me. And she's like, I'm watching my country and my culture and my heritage be destroyed before my eyes, and no one is listening to me. As a filmmaker, talk about that. And as a historian, talk about, we always talk about history happening before our eyes, but usually when we're talking about history happening before our eyes, we're not talking about colonization. But for you as a historian, what is it like going to a country like South Papua and watching colonization happen? Watching this industrialization and this westernization of South Papua, and by broader expanse, Indonesian culture still being transformed.
so like I said before, because I came from West Sumatra, that I didn't see how my lands are changing. So when I came to South Papua and meeting these people from Auyu tribe, it really feels like okay, now I see it myself, something like that. And um I don't know, it's really, for me, the process is really reflective. Like in West Sumatra, I don't really, so we don't have this much of palm oil plantation. Like we have this palm oil plantation expansion back in West Sumatra, but only in few areas. But in Papua, I think it's really massive. And you can see how the surroundings, you can see the militarism vibes and atmosphere once
Mm.
once you enter South Papua, and you can see the military is everywhere. It's really I don't know. I'm not shocked, but uh the vibe was dense and thick at the time. And that this is something that I don't feel in my own kampung in West Sumatra or in my own land. So I think what was emerged when I came is the militarism is something that I feel really happening. So it's not only that the culture was changing, the industry where came, but the industry came also with the military. So I think it's something that's really uh I feel when I came to West Papua, and I see how the difference between we who are living in Sumatra and Java, that we saw this. So every time we came to places and area who now have their land cultivating for palm oil or for mining and sort of thing, I think the really first thing that I used to experience is the militarism.
Mm.
And now we have this what do we call that, undang-undang? We have let me check what is sorry.
Okay, no problem.
So we have this law, militarism law, undang-undang. Uh, so yeah. So and now because we have this new president that we got elected last year, and he's also have this bloody track because he's a general. So yeah, everything is just, I don't know what's the English word for that. Sorry.
It's I get what you mean because it's kind of because in the letter again the military is mentioned, and like she mentions actually and it's funny because she mentions the military in conjunction with knowledge, you know,
Yeah.
and like the only way that she that Rika was able to learn was basically getting on these military transport trucks and going to the city to learn, you know, and like the military is bad. She's like they're an oppressive force, you know, like with colonization does come militarization because these colonizers uses the military to oppress people. We're seeing it happen live and in person here in like North America, in the US, where the American government is using their military to, you know, perform fascism live and in person in the US, which is surreal to see. And like in the letter, the same thing is said. You know, she's watching like fascism unfold in her country, but this has allowed her to gain knowledge because she went to the city, and you mentioned the city earlier. It was
Yeah, okay.
Maracay. And so she sees the military in Maracay, and she's like, there's nothing we can do
Mhm,
except gain knowledge. You know,
mhm,
she's telling Mila like the only way that we can save ourselves as women is through knowledge. You know, she's encouraging Mila to seek knowledge and education for herself. And I thought and I want and then right after she starts talking about religion, you know,
mhm,
again she ties religion to knowledge, you know. She and it's interesting because in the film and the letter starts out with Rika talking about Mother Earth, you know, and talking about culture and like indigenous culture and identity. Then she switches over and she starts talking about the creation story, you know. And I thought it was actually and that's when I was in the film, I was like, this is actually kind of brilliant tying religion to colonization and militarization and the creation story. Because she's like, I believe in Mother Earth. I believe in the culture, in the land as an indigenous person. But then she starts talking about religion. And she starts talking about Christianity. And, and it would have been more like Catholicism, because in doing my reading, it was more like the Catholic Church, because it was Dutch that went into Papua New Guinea and South Papua to colonize and spread the Christian religion. And she's reciting the story of the creation from Genesis. In God, he separated the dry land from the sea, and he called it land and he called it water. And she kind of talks about how the land is being destroyed by colonizers. And she's like, to destroy the land is to go against God's word. But she's like, how are these people saying that they're followers of Christ and followers of God, but they're destroying the very thing that God said to cherish? So I want to talk a bit about that, about these themes of nature and religion in the film and in the letter.
South Papua is mostly maybe Catholic. And what I know and what I saw is that religion came along with colonization. So it's something that brought by the colonizers. So, hi, we're here, we're going to cultivate your land, but we also bring this God to uplift your life, to what do we call that, to brighten our life. So I think it's happened everywhere. In my case, in West Sumatra, Islam were introduced early than the Dutch. So it came around 13th or 14th century or something before Dutch came to. And in South Papua, what was happening, I guess, the Catholicism, the Catholic and the Christianity was introduced by the Dutch and the British colonizer. So I think, and when the first time I talked to Ricarda, I think she's a really interesting personality, because he talks about what he believes in terms of that she was this OU tribe people, but also it's mix of what she believes in traditional belief, but it's also a mix with this church theme beliefs. So it's really a mix of a cultural beliefs and Catholicism. So I think it's really important how religion was introduced by colonization and bring along with the colonization. And it's also interesting to see that how all this movement by the South OU is brought with the church. So before they go to the before they file a complaint to the court, so it's actually the church who first help them to, okay, we're going to file a complaint to, maybe you can do this and do that. And it's actually the church who are helping them. So yeah, I think it's really nice to see how all of this aspect is colliding. So
Yeah, I liked it. I like how, like, because the letter does take this journey again, talking from almost like the creation of life, like, like creating Mila in her womb. Then she's like talking to this little girl that she's talking about. She's talking about women in West Papua, in South Papua culture, in Indonesian culture as a whole. And then she talks about the gender disparities, like how women are valued but still also not listened to. Women are nurturers, where we give birth to the same people who tell us that our opinions don't matter. Like, she talks about all of these things, and you talk about these things in a letter. And then the religion was what really the religion really the way how the religion ties in is really interesting to me as someone who grew up in the church in the Caribbean, like religion is a very big part of Southeast Asian culture, and it's a very big part of Caribbean culture as well. In the Caribbean, our predominant culture is Christianity, particularly Protestantism, like for instance, on Barbados, our largest denomination is Pentecostal, and then there's Baptist, and then there's Seventh Day Adventist, which I was a part of for most of my life, and then there's like Anglican and Catholic, and then all of these other kind of sub genres of Christianity. But so like when she started talking about Christianity and like how she's like kind of like, I believe in Mother Earth. I believe in my indigenous culture. I believe in my heritage and my ancestry, but I've also been indoctrinated into this colonial belief system, like that's become a part of who I am, this is a part of my identity. And she like, as a woman, this is going to become a part of your identity too. But the way she talks about it being a part of identity, it wasn't really necessarily Christianity per se and believing in Jesus. It has to do with how being a woman in this culture is her cross to bear. She likens it to like Jesus carrying the cross. She named the Via della Rosa. When she said that, I was like, okay, cool, because there's this song that I love. It's kind of like an opera called the Via della Rosa, and the Via della Rosa is the road that Jesus walked on when he was carrying the cross to his crucifixion. So she mentions that, and it was like, well, yes. She's like, being a woman in this world is glorious, but it's also a cross to bear. It's a punishment. It's this heavy thing that we have to bear. And then she then compares the cross to colonization, to westernization, to industrialization. She and I love the editing, and this is where we're gonna start talking a bit about the technical aspects of the film, because the choice in archival footage ties very closely into what's being described in the letter. Like we see the images that match almost word for word what's being described. So even though the film visually isn't narratively flowing, the pictures, if you're paying attention to what's being said, the pictures match what's being said. And when she's talking about Christianity and this cross to bear, there's these images that you show of these men from South Papua erecting giant red crosses all across South Papua, and the thing that really struck me with these images in particular is these are trees that had to be cut down to be turned into crosses. Like why is religion so closely tied to destruction of nature? And that's what she's talking about. She's talking about we as women, our bodies are being destroyed by this system, and our country, our land is being destroyed by this system the very same way. Talk about that, because talk about choosing the archival footage. Like what came first, writing the letter or the archival footage? Like, because I thought the way you chose the images to match what is being said in the letter, especially the crosses, these giant red crosses, or you can't miss them. And like it really does strike a chord, like why is Christianity so closely tied to destruction? Why should it be?
I could say that everything was happen parallel, I guess, while writing the letter. So I don't know. I'm not a Christian, but I think I saw what do we call that? Mel Gibson's movie. Do you remember?
Oh, Passion of the Christ.
Passion of the Christ. So I think I watched that movie when I was like 20 something of age.
That film left a mark on a lot of people. It was a scar.
Yeah, right. So I think it's really interesting to see how religion are used to use as a way of sacrificing, but at the same point also a way of struggle and and to cope with Mark said that religion is addicted, and what do we call that? And
religion is the opiate of the masses. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So, so I think it's really interesting that I could show that in terms of South Papua. Not only South Papua, I guess, because I think I also feel that kind of the same thing because I saw. Uh, I think I'll talk a lot about my background as a West Sumatran because now the conservationism and extremism is kind of growing up in West Sumatra as well. So I think it's really interesting to see how all this aspect is colliding and overlapping into each other. Uh, and the process was so yeah, I watched that movie and it really left scars. And also I think I have this bundle of 12 Apostle series. I don't know why, but I kind of watched that. And that time in South Papua there was seven uh there's something called Tujuh Menara. So this a seven giant company
Mm,
that expand this palm oil plantation in South Papua. So I think it's kind of it kind of inspired me to have this seven giant company and like to what we call that, to compare them to to this seven say from Jesus or something like that at the beginning. So it's also inspired the letter how I constructed uh the the when I try to compare the letter to the archival.
mm,
And because this South Papua, the OU tribe have this eventually they have this tradition called the Sasi. Sasi as is the tradition where they towering a red giant cross
mm,
to say that this is the border. You can came into this. You couldn't enter my land because this is the border. This is where uh, uh, we where we erected this red giant crosses. So this is the border. This is where you couldn't came into our land. So
mm,
it eventually they have this kind of tradition. So yeah, everything was actually a mix of this cultural aspect from South Papua, but also this religious aspect uh, uh, from these people.
mm. And to talk a bit about the choosing the archival footage and the editing. So your editor is Haryali Kurniawan, and again, like the editing for this film is so interesting because first of all, like the camera is like stuck on these pictures. It's almost like I was wondering if it was. It's almost like I think it's what do you call it? Like a photographer's loop. You know, like the thing, the little loop thing that you use to look at pictures and stuff. And that's kind of how I saw it as like you as a filmmaker, but we as the audience, we're looking at these pictures very close to them. And it's almost like usually in
Mhm,
photography and in filmmaking, you do that because you're looking for imperfections in the shot. You know, if there's
mhm,
something that needs to be edited out. But in this
mhm,
one, you're like, there's nothing wrong with these images, but I want you to see all of these small details of these people, you know, of Ricarda, because there's like images where she's talking about listening and seeing, and the
mhm,
camera zooms in on her ear, you know, on her eye, and it's on profile. And then we see like the pictures of the crosses being erected, you know. Again, some of the footage is still pictures, but then some of it is video of archival video, like the crosses going up. That's video. One of the few moments in the film where there's movement is when these crosses are being erected. Everything else is still photography. So talk
mhm.
about just choosing the images and the footage that you wanted in this film, because the way how the camera just stays on these pictures is very visually interesting and unique, I think.
Mhm. So I think using this archival footage is I don't know, maybe you noticed that this a very slow pace editing, and I think it's our way to talk about how colonialism is not only about the land extraction, but it also about the time extraction,
Mm.
how we were introduced to time colonization, time that defined by the colonizers. Like the South Papuan didn't see time as this, as we saw this 24 hours.
Yeah.
They saw time as a need to go to the forest and hunt the deer, or and make the living, or cut the trees for consuming. So I think with the editing is um what should I say? When we talk about Papua, like I need to travel 5 hours flight to
Mhm.
be able to go to Papua. So it's far away land for me and for most people who didn't know anything about Papua. But
Mm.
we used to think, I think most people used to feel, okay, I know Papua. This is happening to Papua. And our mainstream media used to portray them in some way, like it's very vast portraying, when just by seeing their like uh I don't know, documentary about Papua, then people start to think, okay, I know what's going on with Papua. But it's actually a really complex situation in Papua that is going on. And what we do with this slow pace and with this editing is try to zoom in into this very person and this very tribe and community, and feel that we were we are this far, but we also have to not rushing our perception, our perspective into something that not actually happened to us. So I think it's something that I want to the audience to be able to perceive.
Mm.
So not rushing our perspective, our what we think we knew, because Papua, I think it's really complex. There's a lot of thing going on. It's like, yeah, the religions that we talk about, the colonization, and the religion that being brought and it's introduced by the colonization and sort of things. There's also palm oil's expansion, and now that the government say that they will open up like billions, millions, or billions acres of land
Mm.
to in terms of bioethanol that they're going
Wow.
to, yeah, so in terms of clean energy, so they will clean more land for the energy transition. So yeah, this is really complex. So I think by having this slow pace also is a symbol of resistance, if I could say. So yeah.
I understand what you mean because you're asking the audience to take our time, to
Mhm.
sit down and watch and listen. Most of all, listen to what's being said and take our time
Mhm.
because you said like time there is slightly different. And in that, they are, like we discussed at the beginning, like they are currently experiencing colonization that most of the world experienced 100, 200, 300 years ago. So like time for them slowed, but it's speeding up rapidly because you said, like you mentioned that the like now they like all of this is happening so recently but so quickly, and
Mhm.
like I'm reading like even the region south, because it's called South Papua province, like even politically, like there are still like this there were still disputes between like the borders, between South Papua, Papua New Guinea, North
Yeah.
Papua, and all of these things, these disputes, and like gaining independence and recognition as a sovereign state, and all of these things are still fairly recently in South Papua's history. So you have all of these things happening. So I understand what you mean about slowing the pace of the film down, because it's a 15-minute short and the pace is a bit slow, but the pace I think is necessary to say, because they're asking us to pay attention to what's being said in by Ricarda, you know, like she's telling her story, she's reading this letter, and it takes time. You know, she's taking her time to say all to tell her daughter everything that she wants to tell her. It's almost you get this sense like, and this isn't necessarily about Ricarda herself, but it's almost like this is a woman who's reading a letter, feeling as though time is running out. So she's saying everything that she needs to say before the time is gone. You know, so I completely understand me about the pace being slow. And talk about the editing just the film style itself. Like the camera, that's the camera is so close to the pictures. It is almost like a photographer's loop that we're looking at these pictures. What made you decide to film it this way? You know, rather than like, for instance, like some films when you have archival footage and pictures, they do like the horizontal shots. I can't remember the term, but it's like when you're like watching through a microfiche machine, you know, where you're watching the images flip across and stuff. You don't do that, you know, you're just like moving it around these different pictures and stuff. So what made you decide this is how I want to film these images versus like using microfiche or like a PowerPoint presentation almost?
I think it's mostly experimenting with material that I got, because it's also part of experimenting with the narrative as well, because as I said before, that I couldn't when I came to the field that she was 9 months pregnant, and then I have to find a way how to make this thing works, how to make the story works. So it's part of experimenting. So I have this I think it's also influenced by Chris Marker. I used to watch his film a lot. I think it's really affect me in some way. But you know, this film have still photograph being what's the English word for that? And what I try to do, how to hand animate the photo and see what will happen. And I don't know, it's mostly part of experimenting with the material, and with the narratives.
Talk a bit about working with Harry Aldi and figuring out the editing style for the film, because the editing for this film I think is very subtle, because there's no like dramatic transitions. It's all very slow and very subtle.
Yes, yes. So it's, I don't know, it's how many films that we already been working together. Sometimes he was also my director sometimes, but in this project we decide to kind of switching role. But I think I think uh is not talking in English, so I don't know how to say what's it's really the ability to kind of interpret what the way I interpret this story. I don't know how to say it. Like, do you get what I mean?
I get what you mean. Like it's kind of like how how you because the story is a letter being read. You don't. There's nothing dramatic necessary in the story itself. You know, so you don't need the editing to be dramatic. You know, because again, like the pace of the film matches the pace that Ricarda is reading the letter. You know, so like she's not reading it like she's telling like a big like a for instance like a story like Pride and Prejudice. You know, it's not a dramatic fictional story. You know, it's like a very calm, very emotional moment. So it's like the editing has to match that. You know, like there's no dramatic transitions where it's like aha, like see all of these animals or whatever. You know, I get what you mean. I get it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I think it's really important to not dramatizing what was happening in Papua, because it's already very dramatic. What was happening, it's already very complex, very dramatic. So I think we don't feel the need to also dramatizing the archive, the footage and sort of thing. So
Hmm. No, I get what you mean. I think the word you're probably looking for is sensationalize. You don't need to make it like overly
yeah,
dramatic or sensational.
yes, yes.
Yeah. One of the last questions I want to ask you is like, has Ricardo seen the film?
Mhm. Yes, yes.
And
But
what did she think about it?
we didn't see it together, I guess.
Hmm.
So after I went there in 2023, I met her in 2024, where she reads the letter. And then I didn't met her yet after that, but she already, at the first time she reads the letter, she was crying.
Hmm.
But in terms of the whole film, we didn't talk about it yet, but she knows that the film was already screened in some places, but we haven't talked about it yet. But at first time she was reading the letter, she was cried, because I think it's really emotional back then. She was just giving birth. Now the little girl, uh, it's already 2 years old, I guess.
And a lot has changed in
Yeah,
2 years, right? Like everything, so much.
yes.
Even while she was
Because
even after the letter, so much has changed in that short space
yeah,
of
yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah. Oh, this one is I think I forgot to point out that she was under threat when she came to Jakarta to file a what do you call that? It's a law terms. So they appeal to cassation, where they file a cassation to the Supreme Court. She was under threat. So I think using archival footage is a safer way to talk about her story.
No, that's and I think it is because you kind of almost make it like again, like, as we were saying, like it could be so many different any woman telling this
Mhm.
story, like it doesn't have to be necessarily her. It could be any woman. So and I think and like it works, as like her own personal testimony, like it's not just a letter to Mila, it's a personal testimony of the experiences of women in South Papua,
Yeah.
and so for my last question for you is you is there is how has making this film changed perhaps the way you see your work as a filmmaker, but particularly a female filmmaker?
Uh, the film itself is actually the last piece of a trilogy. So I made three shorts on South Papua, on Auyu people. And I think uh and the most, if I could say, it's as approach in this trilogy, and especially in the last piece, uh is it's a very reflective process.
Mhm.
And like I said before, I think for me it's really to see it myself, how a beautiful land were transformed. And when it transform, is not only the land transform, but it's changed every single aspect of people's life who living that land, I guess. And yeah, so yeah, I mostly see it as a reflective process that I don't know. At some point, it really made me very pessimistic about to
It made
see.
you think about it made you think about all the mistakes you made.
Like I feel really pessimistic sometimes to see the future. Like what would what we could inherit to our next generation. How, like, how can we envision the future for our our children? I
Mm.
think it's really a very reflective process about the past and how it affects the future. I think it's really, yeah.
Yeah, I get what you mean. Like when I was in Bali there for at the festival, I was talking to so many of the young like Indonesian filmmakers. So many of them are in school or just out of school, and they're like showing their very first films at the festival.
Mm,
And like a lot of them are also university students. Like some people are studying economics. Some of the students are studying accounting, literature, music.
mm,
Like so many of the volunteers for Minikino are from all of these different disciplines. Um, and doing different studies. Most of them are from Jakarta, but
mm,
like when I was there, I remember I was talking. I told so many of them, I'm like, what I'm seeing from the film industry in Indonesia, from like these East Asian countries. So many young filmmakers are doing such amazing work. Telling such amazing stories and about their culture, but just like the world and life in general. And I felt so hopeful there. Like I was like, you guys are doing amazing. You guys are like the future of the film industry. And I mean that and I meant that. And then I came back to Canada and it's like a completely different world, and it's just like and I'm thinking, what are we leaving for not only just young people here in North America, but what are we leaving for the young people in Indonesia and in Southeast Asia? What are we leaving for these young filmmakers to look forward to? Like, what are we doing? So I completely understand what you're saying. Like, it's kind of like this. You're like, what world are we leaving for them? Are we even leaving a world for them? And are we leaving a world for them to make stories and tell stories about? And
mm,
so like again, like when I was watching this film, I thought about the same thing. I'm like, is the story is about like I really got the sense like in watching the film is like this mother's telling this story to her daughter, feeling like time is running out. She's like, I don't know how much time I have left to tell you this story because I don't know what's gonna be left of this world
mm.
by the time I get to the end of it, and like so I completely understand what you're saying because it's just like that, and that's like we're I think we're all having like an existential crisis because the world is like, what is happening? I think we're all having existential crisis right now.
Yes, yes, yes. That's what I mean. So I think it's the biggest part for making this trilogy. I try to be I don't know, to be optimistic, but I think it's a very brave decision to be optimistic in this time of crisis right now, right?
I think so too. Like being optimistic takes a lot of energy, but I think it's necessary. Like
Yes.
we have to believe that there's
Mm.
something to look forward to. We have these stories that do need to be told,
Yeah.
so we're gonna tell them. Even
Yeah.
while during the day you're like sitting down, there's always this moment you're like, what is happening?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
feel
And
overwhelmed.
because yes,
So
yes.
it's
And the
very
next generation could be the anchor to stay optimistic.
we need to stay optimistic for them. We need to stay optimistic for the Milas.
Yeah.
We gotta we
Yes.
do. We have to leave
Yeah.
these stories for the Milas to read. Thank you so much, Wulan, for taking the time for talking
Thank
to me and everything.
you.
Thank you so much for this film. And I wasn't able to see it during the festival, unfortunately, but I'm glad
Yeah.
that I'm actually kind of glad that I was able to watch it at home because I was able to take my time with it and like really sit with it and everything rather
Thank
than
you.
having to like rush through screenings, going from one screen or whatever. So I'm glad that I was actually able to watch it at home and just sit and take my time with it and like really let it marinate.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to your team and first of all to Ricarda for like telling this story and sharing it with you and you two coming together to write, I think, this beautiful letter to all daughters. I think it's a film to all daughters. It's a tale to all daughters. But thank you so much to everyone involved in the film and congratulations to you because I think you won a couple of awards for it and you were nominated at Minikino for it as well. So you've done extremely well for yourself with this film.
Thank you, Carolyn.